Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Andrew. Sometimes you can't win in a relationship where the goalposts keep moving, leaving you always at fault. I'd been married to Lauren for almost 7 years when everything fell apart. 7 years that had started with genuine love and affection, but had gradually, over the years, deteriorated into something cold and incomprehensible. We connected online under the comment section of a pet post. We would end up carrying our conversation to the DM. I learned from our conversation that she worked in human resources at a tech company. I, on the other hand, worked in a manufacturing firm. We'd keep talking, and before long, discovered we had chemistry and exchanged numbers. After having a series of meetups, we decided to act on our feelings. I asked her out and she accepted. The early relationship had been good. We were affectionate with each other, constant touching, playful flirting, that easy physical intimacy that comes when two people are attracted to each other and comfortable showing it. The physical side of our relationship had been active and healthy. I was usually the one initiating. That was just my nature, being more outwardly expressive. But Lauren had always been receptive and engaged. Sex had been frequent and felt mutual, like something we both enjoyed and valued as part of our connection. We got married after dating for 2 years. It was a small wedding, mostly family and close friends. We honeymooned in Hawaii, then came back and settled into married life in a rented house in a decent neighborhood. About a year into the marriage, we started trying for a baby. Both of us wanted children eventually and felt ready to start that chapter. Lauren got pregnant fairly quickly, maybe 3 months after we started trying. We were excited as we started planning, telling family, thinking about how we'd convert the spare bedroom into a nursery. But at about 10 weeks, Lauren had a miscarriage. She went to the hospital for a routine appointment, and they couldn't find a heartbeat. The loss hit us both hard. Lauren especially struggled with it, the physical trauma, the emotional devastation, the feeling that her body had failed somehow. I tried to be supportive, to give her space to grieve, while also processing my own sadness about losing a pregnancy we'd both wanted. We agreed to wait before trying again, to give Lauren time to heal physically and emotionally, to just focus on each other and our marriage for a while. That waiting period stretched from months into years. Life got busy with work demands. Lauren seemed hesitant to try again and said she wasn't ready yet. I didn't push, figured she'd let me know when she felt ready. But during those years, something shifted in our relationship. The easy affection we'd shared at the beginning started to feel more complicated. Work stress increased for both of us. I got promoted to a senior position, which meant more extended hours and greater responsibility. Lauren's company underwent restructuring, which made her job more demanding. We'd come home most nights exhausted, eat dinner, watch TV, and go to bed. The routine became monotonous. Physical intimacy became less spontaneous. Instead of happening naturally when we felt connected, it started feeling scheduled, like something we did on weekends because that's when we had energy, not because desire struck naturally. And I noticed Lauren's enthusiasm waning. I still found her attractive, still desired her, and still wanted that physical connection. She'd still engage when I initiated, but it felt increasingly like compliance rather than genuine interest. For me, intimacy wasn't just about sex, so I continued initiating regularly, would compliment her appearance, touch her affectionately, suggest we go to bed early on weekend nights. Tried to maintain the physical side of our relationship because I believed it was essential for keeping us connected. Lauren started responding differently. The rejections became more frequent. She'd say she was too tired, not in the mood, had a headache, or just wanted to relax. All legitimate reasons individually, but they added up to a pattern where we were being intimate maybe once every month instead of several times a week we'd maintained when we got married earlier. I tried not to take it personally. People's libidos fluctuate. Stress affects desire. This was a phase we'd work through. But the frequency of rejections and the way Lauren would frame them started bothering me. She'd act like my advances were an inconvenience. It felt like she was tolerating my attraction to her rather than appreciating it. After several months of this pattern, I decided we needed to talk about it. Approached her one evening when we were both home and relatively relaxed. Explained gently that I'd noticed we weren't connecting physically as much anymore. Asked if something was going on and whether there was something I could do differently. Lauren's response was immediate and defensive. Said she was exhausted all the time. That she was working full-time and then coming home to a house that needed cleaning, meals that needed cooking, and laundry that needed doing. By the time evening came, she had no energy left for anything, including sex. She pointed out that I worked long hours, but didn't contribute equally to household management. The mental load of running the household fell on her. If I helped more with chores and took some of that burden off her shoulders, she might have energy for intimacy. I felt terrible. Hadn't realized she was feeling that overwhelmed. Promised immediately to do better, to take on more household responsibilities so she wouldn't be carrying everything. Starting the next day, I changed my routine. Would come home from work, do chores immediately, before relaxing. Started doing all the grocery shopping on my way home. Cooked dinner most nights. Did laundry on weekends. Cleaned the kitchen and bathrooms regularly. Took on probably 60% of the household tasks in addition to my full-time, demanding job. Lauren appreciated it initially. Thanked me for stepping up. Seemed less stressed in the evenings. But it didn't change our physical relationship. If anything, the frequency decreased further, because I was now so exhausted from work plus household responsibilities that I had less energy to initiate. A few months into this new arrangement, on a Saturday night when we'd both been home all day and I'd cleaned the house and made dinner, I tried initiating. We hadn't been intimate in over 2 months. I approached her in bed, started kissing her and touching her affectionately. Lauren pulled back immediately, with her whole body went rigid. Then she snapped at me, told me she just wanted one evening where I wasn't trying to get her into bed. Said it felt like that's all I saw her for, sex. That I sexualized her too much, and it was disgusting. The words were harsh. I pulled back immediately, apologized. I felt shocked and hurt, but tried to hide it. I'd thought being attracted to my wife was a good thing. That wanting physical connection with her was normal and healthy in a marriage. Apparently, I was wrong. Apparently, my desire for her was making her uncomfortable and disgusted. I apologized again. Told her I hadn't realized I was making her uncomfortable, that I'd respect her boundaries better. Then I rolled over to my side of the bed. Lay there in the dark, feeling confused and rejected, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. I'd been feeling Lauren pulling away for months, but she'd never articulated it so harshly before. She never told me directly that my attraction to her was unwelcome. Now, I didn't know how to navigate our relationship. Every instinct I had apparently made her uncomfortable. But I couldn't just stop finding my wife attractive. Couldn't turn off my desire for connection. The next morning, I made a decision. If my physical advances made Lauren uncomfortable, I'd stop making them entirely and would wait for her to initiate. I would let her control when and if we had any physical contact. Figured that was the safest way to respect her boundaries without constantly walking on eggshells, wondering if this touch or that compliment was going to upset her. So I stopped. Altogether initiating sex. Stopped touching her affectionately beyond the most basic gestures. Stopped complimenting her appearance. And stopped doing anything that could be interpreted as sexual or romantic attention. I still did the household chores, still worked my demanding job. Still paid all the bills, mortgage, utilities, her car payment, everything. Still functioned as a husband in every practical way. I just removed all physical and romantic elements from our relationship. Lauren noticed, but didn't say anything. Didn't ask why I'd stopped. Didn't express concern or try to address it. So I assumed this was what she wanted. That she was relieved I'd finally backed off. That she preferred this version of our marriage, where we functioned as roommates who split chores rather than as romantic partners. Weeks turned into months. Our routine became completely devoid of physical intimacy. We'd sleep in the same bed, but on opposite sides, not touching. We would eat meals together, but conversations were surface level. We would exist in the same spaces, but feel completely disconnected. The emotional distance grew proportional to the physical distance. Without that intimate connection, we had less to talk about, less investment in each other's lives beyond the logistics of running a household. By the 6th month of this new normal, we were essentially strangers living together, polite roommates who happened to be married. I threw myself into work to avoid thinking about how lonely I felt. I would stay late at the office, take on extra projects, and volunteer for business trips, anything to fill the time and avoid coming home to a house where my presence felt merely tolerated. One evening, I came home particularly exhausted from a long day and a difficult project deadline. It was almost 9 o'clock. I'd skipped dinner, just wanted to shower and sleep. I went through my usual routine, came in, said hello to Lauren, who was watching TV, showered, changed into pajamas, and went straight to bed. About 15 minutes later, as I was trying to sleep, Lauren came into the bedroom. Her expression was agitated. She stood at the foot of the bed, looking at me with this mixture of anger and something else I couldn't identify. Then she started an argument, said she couldn't take this anymore, that she felt abandoned in our marriage, that I'd become distant and cold, that I didn't even desire her anymore. I sat up in bed, confused. After 6 months of maintaining exactly the distance she'd asked for, she was now upset about it. I pointed out as calmly as I could that I'd stopped initiating because she told me I sexualized her too much, that I was trying to respect her boundaries, that I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. Lauren's response was to accuse me of cheating, said that the only reason a man would stop pursuing his wife was if he was getting it elsewhere, that my withdrawal was proof I was having an affair. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. I'd been working 60-hour weeks and doing household chores in my spare time. When exactly would I have time or energy for an affair? I told her I wasn't cheating, that I was just exhausted from work and from trying to figure out what she actually wanted from me, that every time I thought I understood her needs, they changed. Lauren got more agitated, asking why I wouldn't try even when she said no. Why do I just give up so easily? Why I wasn't fighting for our marriage? I felt my frustration rising. Told her she was becoming impossible to understand, that I couldn't keep adjusting to constantly moving targets, that I'd done everything she'd asked, taken on household responsibilities, backed off physically, and it still wasn't right. That comment triggered something in Lauren. She started screaming, hurling insults, calling me a terrible husband, accusing me of not loving her, saying I'd never cared about her needs. The verbal assault was overwhelming. I sat there, taking it in for several minutes, while she unleashed years of apparently pent-up resentment. Finally, I got up, told her I was done with this conversation, grabbed a pillow, and went to sleep in the guest room. I lay there in the dark, listening to her continue yelling from the bedroom. Eventually, the noise stopped. The house went quiet, and I realized with absolute clarity that this marriage was over. There was no winning. No configuration of behavior would make Lauren happy. No way to be the husband she wanted, because what she wanted kept changing, ensuring I was constantly failing. She'd said I sexualized her too much, so I'd stopped completely. Now that was wrong, too. I was damned if I did, damned if I didn't. I couldn't live like this anymore. Couldn't spend the rest of my life trying to decode constantly shifting expectations while being told I was failing regardless of what I did. The next morning, I started making calls. Found a divorce attorney through a colleague's recommendation. The divorce attorney specialized in no-fault divorces. I met with him the following week to explain the situation. The attorney suggested we file for dissolution, divide assets equitably, and be done within several months if Lauren cooperated. I told him to prepare the paperwork. While waiting for the divorce papers to be finalized, Lauren and I maintained a cold civility at home. Barely spoke beyond necessities. I slept in the guest room every night. We'd eat meals separately, just existed in parallel without connecting. Lauren seemed to sense something had fundamentally changed, but didn't push. Probably relieved to have space for me. I withdrew completely emotionally. Stopped caring about trying to fix anything. just went through motions while waiting for the legal process to complete. The papers were ready about 3 weeks later. The attorney had them served to Lauren at home when I was out. When I came back that evening, Lauren was waiting with the papers in her hand. Her face was a mixture of shock and fury. She started yelling before I'd even closed the door, demanded to know what this was, whether I was serious. How could I do this to her? I stayed calm, told her I was completely serious, that our marriage was over, that we'd tried and failed to make each other happy. It was time to end things officially. Lauren shifted tactics, started crying, asking why I was giving up so easily, saying we could fix things if we tried, that we just needed counseling. I told her I was done trying. Those 7 years had been enough time to figure out if we were compatible, that we clearly weren't. She got angry again, accusing me of all sorts of things, abandoning her, being selfish, never really loving her. Went through a whole litany of grievances I'd apparently committed throughout our marriage. I listened without responding, realized I didn't even feel angry anymore, just tired and ready for it to be over. I told her my attorney would be in touch, that I'd be moving out within the week, that she could stay in the rental house until the lease ended in a few months. I'd already found a new apartment across town, signed a lease, paid rent. I just needed to pack my belongings and go. I spent the next few days packing, while Lauren alternated between crying and yelling. Moved out the following weekend with help from a couple friends. Left most of the furniture and household items for her. The divorce process took about 8 months total. Oregon required a waiting period. We had to divide assets, savings accounts, vehicles, and some retirement funds. All relatively straightforward since we didn't have children or a house we owned. During those months, I had minimal contact with Lauren. Everything went through our attorneys. The few times we had to communicate directly were brief and cold. The divorce was finalized about 1.5 years after I'd first consulted with my attorney. By that point, Lauren and I felt like distant memories of each other rather than people who'd once been married. After everything was official, Lauren apparently started telling people her version of events. I heard through mutual friends, people who remained in contact with both of us, that she was claiming I'd been obsessed with sex. All I'd ever wanted from her was physical gratification. And when she'd refused to be my sex toy, I'd started cheating and eventually left her for someone else. None of it was true. I'd never cheated, had never treated her as just a sexual object, had genuinely loved her and wanted a connection, not just physical release. But her narrative painted me as the villain, the sex-obsessed husband who couldn't respect his wife's boundaries, who'd abandoned her when she'd stood up for herself. I heard about this revisionist history from some friends who'd asked carefully whether the stories Lauren was spreading were accurate. I'd explained briefly what had actually happened, that she'd asked me to stop being physical. Then she'd been upset about that too, that I'd felt caught in an impossible situation where nothing I did was right. Most people who knew me well understood, recognized that Lauren's version didn't match the person I actually was. But I didn't spend energy trying to correct her narrative publicly. I didn't care what people thought. I just focused on rebuilding my life. The apartment I'd moved into was small but comfortable. Gave me space to be alone, to process everything, to start figuring out who I was outside of that failed marriage. I started therapy about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I needed to process what had happened, understand my role in the dysfunction, and figure out healthier patterns for future relationships. My therapist helped me see things more clearly, helped me understand that Lauren had likely been dealing with unresolved trauma from the miscarriage that had affected her relationship with intimacy and me, that her constantly shifting expectations had been her way of maintaining control in a situation where she'd felt powerless. But the therapist also helped me see that I'd enabled some of the dysfunction. My pattern of constantly adjusting to meet Lauren's stated needs without insisting that my own needs be acknowledged had created an imbalanced dynamic, and I'd martyred myself, trying to be the perfect husband without requiring reciprocal effort from her. I learned through therapy that both things could be true. Lauren's behavior had been unfair and inconsistent, and I contributed to the problem by not setting healthy boundaries earlier. Looking back now, almost 3 years after leaving Lauren, I understand what happened in that marriage much more clearly. I learned that you can't save a relationship where one person has decided, consciously or unconsciously, that you'll always be the problem, where the goalposts constantly move to ensure you're always failing. I learned that constant rejection can create its own kind of trauma. Being told your desire for your partner is disgusting damages something fundamental in your sense of self and your ability to connect. I learned that doing everything your partner asks, taking on household responsibilities, backing off physically, giving space, doesn't fix relationship problems if the underlying dynamic is about control rather than genuine incompatibility. I learned that some people will rewrite history to make themselves the victim, regardless of what actually happened. That Lauren's version, where I was the sex-obsessed villain, served her need to avoid accountability for her role in our marriage's failure. Most importantly, I learned that walking away from an impossible situation isn't giving up, it's self-preservation. That I couldn't spend my life trying to meet constantly changing expectations while being told I was failing, regardless of what I did. Some people still ask if I regret the divorce, if I should have tried harder, fought longer, been more patient with Lauren's needs. The answer is no. I gave that marriage many years, tried countless different approaches, adjusted my behavior repeatedly to match what Lauren said she wanted. Nothing was ever enough because the problem wasn't my behavior. The problem was a fundamental dysfunction in how Lauren processed intimacy and connection after our miscarriage. Unresolved trauma that manifested as constantly shifting expectations and blame. I couldn't fix that for her. Could only protect myself from being destroyed by it. The divorce was the right choice. Painful, complicated, but ultimately necessary for both of us to move forward. Lauren needed to face her issues without having me as a scapegoat. I needed to rebuild my sense of self after years of being told I was simultaneously too much and not enough. I don't wish her harm. I hope she eventually gets the help she needs to process what happened and build healthier relationships. But I'm grateful every day that I'm no longer in that marriage, no longer walking on eggshells, and no longer trying to decode impossibly contradictory expectations. I'm building a life that feels authentic and healthy with a partner who communicates clearly and values what I bring to the relationship. That's what I deserve and what everyone deserves.